Marriage counselors. What are the most common mistakes couples make? I've provided couples counseling at different points in my career. Some of the common mistakes I will often see are 1. Expecting partners to be able to read their minds and anticipate their needs and wants. 2. Goes with the first one, lack of communication/comfort with discussing difficult topics. Or one partner being uncomfortable with discussing a topic which leaves both partners feeling frustrated or dissatisfied. 3. Blaming their partner for all issues in the relationship and not taking ownership of their own role in the dysfunction or issues. 4. Not expressing gratitude towards your partner on a regular basis. Experiences and expressions of gratitude can have a really positive effect on psychological well-being, as well as relational strength. 5. Not giving intimacy in their relationship enough attention. This includes but is not limited to banging. Many relationships start with the hot and heavy phase where intimacy can come naturally. As this phase diminishes, many couples do not spend the time and energy to consider how to maintain a healthy level of intimacy now that it doesn't just come naturally. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. 1. Keeping score. A partnership is a team, not a competition. Whether a person keeps score of everything they've done or everything their partner has done, it is a death knell for the relationship. This is one of the most common causes of resentment in a relationship, and you see it often when people use absolute terms to describe themselves or their partners. For example, I always or she never. Remembering that each person has his or her own needs, abilities, skills, and boundaries is essential to a healthy couple. 2. Expecting that because your significant other knows you better than others and is around you most, that they are aware of all your thoughts and feelings. Your partner is not psychic, and no matter how often they are around you or how well they know you, they cannot pick up on every nuance to determine how you are feeling and how they should respond. That is called emotional babysitting, and it cascades into a host of problems and unnecessary hurt. Story 3. Therapists here have served couples. Number one problem I see is overactive threat response creating anger and rigidity. People don't stop to turn down their defense mode and lose sight of love because all their energy is going towards being right or controlling the outcome. Of course that control comes from a place of fear, but fear and vulnerability feels too dangerous. So it typically gets expressed as anger, frustration, or rigidity. Surrender to not having control. Accept what's in front of you and cultivate compassion, please. Because y'all rigid couples who just can't prioritize empathizing with each other over your fear response are driving me nuts. Story 4. Currently student in a clinical psychology doctorate program focusing in marriage and family. If you aren't already familiar with it, I would recommend taking a look at John Gottman's work on romantic relationships. He is one of the best-known researchers on this topic. Perhaps his most famous work is The Four Horsemen. In a 30-minute interview, Gottman was able to accurately predict which couples would divorce based on their interactions with each other, particularly when those interactions included criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Research from the Gottman Institute has expanded on this to provide a pretty comprehensive list of factors that lead to couple conflict and divorce. Gottman also addresses solutions to these issues, which primarily exist within his form of couples therapy. Take this all with a grain of salt. This is one perspective on relationships, but it tends to be a pretty robust and well-researched one, and it also happens to be the one I'm most familiar with. My personal understanding on the issue is that problems arise from a lack of humility, as well as the challenge of getting out of deeply ingrained patterns/cycles of conflict, which generally requires both partners to accept fault and extend grace. Story 5. Not a therapist, but I read an article once that I found to be very useful. I can't remember the exact terms, but basically how you react when your partner reaches out with small probes for connection. It's not necessarily big hobbies or interests, but little things throughout every day that are sort of unconscious reaches for positive feedback from your partner. For example, I see a pretty bird outside and I say, "Oh my god, come look at this cool bird." Or, "Hey, check out this song I really like." If my partner passively or blatantly rejects that, it feels bad, even if I don't always fully recognize that in the moment. Over time, those micro-rejections, as I call them, start to build up, and it's why people start to feel like someone doesn't really care about them. On the flip side, even just a little bit of positive attention and sharing in a moment makes you feel so good. Again, even if you don't even realize it. Getting up and looking at the bird is saying, "This is important to you in this moment, so it's important to me." It's basically like those are these small shared experiences that build up a joint life, and if you start to neglect your partner in those small ways, you can grow distant. I try really hard now to never ignore or reject my partner's small reaches. I don't care about the Instagram meme he wants to show me or the latest NBA news, but I'll listen or look and laugh because I want him to feel loved and appreciated. Story 6. When your significant other brings something to your attention that they need/want, don't react harshly if it's something they've refused to bring up sooner. Getting loud or defensive with a "why didn't you bring this up sooner" will make them shy away from bringing things up again due to the negative reinforcement/backlash. This is especially true if they've been victims of any kind of abusive relationships. Source: literally killed my marriage because I was an idiot and didn't respond in an open, non-positive way. This is great to hear from the perspective of a partner who screwed up. It seems so rare that people are willing to admit their faults. But yeah, people screw up. Sometimes it's in big ways, like by messing up a marriage, and sometimes it's not. But I, for one, think that everyone should move towards being able to admit their own faults. It's great for growth, and also really the only way to do growth. One small thing though, because I took 1 year of psychology in university, it's actually not negative reinforcement, it would be positive punishment, I think. Positive because you're adding a stimulus, not removing it, that would be negative. And punishment is because it is discouraging a behavior and not enforcing it. Therefore, positive punishment. I know it doesn't make any sense. I kind of just wanted to flex. It's fine. Story 7. One of the most toxic things I've found in doing marriage counseling is when couples think of themselves as individuals who happen to be together and not as a couple. Not that I'm advocating enmeshment. That's not really marriage. That's having a roommate, or perhaps less than that even. Marriage is the union of two people. That's what the unity candle and sand and knots are all about. There's a bringing together of two lives that is inseparable. If either member still conceptualizes themselves as a solely autonomous individual whose actions and dispositions impact only themselves, things will go bad eventually. They go bad because it results in a person caring more for themselves than their spouse. This is seen when couples spend money behind each other's backs because, "It's my money, why does it matter?" This means couples keep secrets from each other, which inevitably results in pain. This is seen when couples don't stop to consider their spouse's thoughts, feelings, desires, dreams, abilities, and strengths alongside their weaknesses. The remedy to this is behaving as a unit in small ways and in large. If you're getting something from the fridge, see if your spouse wants anything. It even helps in arguments. No longer is it spouse against spouse, but it's the married couple against the issue causing stress to the unit. When one person considers a course of action, their thoughts ought to be about how it impacts the unit. I get this is probably a good thing, but the way it's worded, it's just a little weird to me. It's like they're just suggesting that the two people become one. And I know that's not what they mean, but the way they said it is a little strange. I agree, though. Doing things behind your partner's back in general is a bad idea, unless it's for a surprise, obviously. Spending money behind your spouse's back, and I don't even mean like, "Oh, honey, I spent this money on this." It just has to be like, if you're asked about it, you tell them, right? I'm assuming here is like they ask about it and you don't tell. It's like a full-on secret. Yeah, that's bad. Story 8. I work with couples and their relationships a lot in my line of work, and do some forms of counseling even though it's not my job or training. But one of the common threads I see running in the midst of relationships/marriages that fall apart is a kind of selfishness. People that don't quite realize that marriage works best when you are both acting in the other's best interest and seeking their happiness more than your own. It crops up a lot, but not exclusively, in intimacy. If your primary concern in banging is you're not going to build any kind of bond or intimate connection, and nor is it going to be much fun for your partner. Marriage is a lot about sacrifice, and the couples I see thriving are the ones who are willing to make sacrifices for the other and for their family. Couples who get married thinking that the coming decades of marriage are going to be exactly like the dating or the honeymoon phase, when they face major challenges or speed bumps in their life together, have a real hard time dealing with it. But I thought I was supposed to be happy. Story 9. This is really a part of relationships. People change and one of three things happen. 1. You change in the same direction. 2. You change in different directions and find a new arrangement for the relationship and new personalities. 3. You change in different directions and you don't find a new arrangement. We had some friends who got married, and we tried so hard to keep them from getting married. He was immature, and she was incredibly immature. She had been engaged 3 times, each time she was dating the next person within a month of the engagement falling through. In one case, it fell through less than a month before the wedding, and she was dating the new guy within a week. This is actually the 2 friends that ended up getting married. They constantly fought. I mean, constantly. I've been present when he's taking off his ring and asked if she wanted it back. Last I saw of them, they were still fighting constantly, and I'm convinced that the only reason they're still married is because they're religious and don't want to be seen in a divorce, or just don't realize how miserable they are. I don't know if they will ever mature, but knowing each one, I know that they will do so in very different directions. This is why people who have not matured should not get married. I understand the sentiment about people who aren't mature shouldn't get married, but like, who is really going to be as an adult like, I'm not mature enough. That is a huge admission of lack of growth that I don't think anyone is going to be doing anytime soon. Or at least anyone who's inclined to make bad decisions like this anyway. Story 10. Not exactly a marriage counselor, but speaking from experience. 1. Allowing family/friends to get too involved in the relationship. Remember the saying, too many cooks spoil the broth? Yeah, exactly this. 2. Assuming you know exactly what your partner wants at any given point in time. People will not always be in the frame of mind we expect them to be. Sometimes it's best to give them their own space. 3. Not discussing finances deep enough or avoiding it altogether. 4. Discussing really important decisions or making these decisions via text messages. 5. Not opening up to each other for fear of having a conflict. This tends to mount up tensions deep down inside and will normally come up when an argument occurs, thereby adding more fuel to the fire. 6. Adopting a tit-for-tat policy. One should aim to put their 100% commitment into a relationship for the sake of the relationship itself, and not because they expect return sooner or later. Story 11. My wife and I have happily been together for nearly 30 years and married for almost 20. Communication is key. My parents had very poor communication skills when I was growing up, and I saw how it affected them, and I also often bore the burden of enduring their silent anger. I vowed not to do that. It can be difficult, but you have to talk. This is critical. Of course, every couple is different and has different ways to converse, but it must be done. The most important thing I would stress is don't go to bed angry. If my wife and I have a problem, we talk it out or the lights stay on until we're done. You cannot let those silent wedges dig their way into your souls. Something will break eventually, and may be irreparable. I would like to end with a very positive example of communication. Last Saturday, my wife and I woke up and started cooking for an evening to be spent at a friend's house to watch the new Deadwood movie. We love the series and have watched it at least 4 to 5 times. We were going to make a themed meal of a crock pot with chili with cornbread and of course peaches with authorized cinnamon. My wife put on the soundtrack for the show and we got started in the kitchen. As she was taking something down from the cupboard, I noticed the scattering of gray in her hair. Then the Lyle Lovett song Old Friend began to play. It had never meant much to me before, but in that moment it hit me so hard. I nearly broke down on the spot. Remember how Amelie dissolved into a puddle? That's what my heart did. I realized that she is my old friend. Of course, I don't think of her as old, but we're both getting older. Still, at 63, she's often mistaken for a decade younger. Attitude and energy counts for a lot, and that's part of the reason why we fit so well, because we still feel young at heart. I took a minute to compose myself and we carried on cooking. But that feeling wouldn't go away. It wasn't as if I didn't know that she's the love of my life, but that moment was such an intense confirmation that it took me 2 days to tell her, because I wasn't sure that I'd get through it without breaking down, and I didn't want her to think that my tears meant something was wrong. I told her yesterday afternoon when I got home from work, and she was so happy about it. She's been out of work for 6 months and really struggling with feelings of inadequacy and attractiveness. We've both gained some weight, but to me she's still as beautiful and sexy as ever. She really appreciated hearing how I felt, because she was dealing with all these negative thoughts, and just me telling her how I felt was a big boost for her. Talk to your partners, people. Don't assume. Confirm. Love needs to be nurtured in order to last. Do the work. Story 12. Current marriage, couple, and family's master's counseling student here. Unspoken family rules that you bring into relationships are huge. Obviously, you didn't grow up together, and depending on how you did grow up, you may have had some completely different family of origin experiences. It can be as simple as your family separated out laundry by color, and your significant others just threw everything together. So you have different family rules regarding laundry. Maybe your family had the rule of family problems stay in the family, and your significant other's family talked to other people outside of the family about all the problems freely. Everybody has these rules. Talking about them and uncovering them without judgment will go a very long way in maintaining and deepening connection. If you don't talk about them, it is easy to get into negative interactional patterns that are just rehearsals of how your family did things and not creating healthy, mutually safe patterns. Also, I recommend that everyone in relationships take an attachment style quiz and compare their attachment style, secure, anxious, or avoidant, because that reveals a lot of unspoken rules as well. Story 13. Not a counselor, but advice I received a long time ago from a nurse. I was working a unit as a CNA, and the old, intimidating, unsmiling veteran nurse, my favorite on the unit, walks into the unit from lunch holding hands with her husband, a Terry Pratchett lookalike. My young 20-ish self commented that you don't see that every day. She retrieves her battered clipboard from the desk, leans into me and says, "You want to know the secret, kid?" I said yes, because who doesn't want to know that secret? And there's this collective lean in from the entire desk, docs, nurses, support. Pens stop moving. People don't know how to grow old and change together. You will change as you age. So will your partner. The question is, do you know how to grow and change together? Then she walks off to answer a call light. wisdom to hold on to. The girl you married doesn't exist anymore. She's grown up, hopefully, and changed. Story 14. 1. Not actively listening. I'm always shocked by how few people actually know how to listen to and validate their partner. 2. Getting married young. I keep having married clients in their mid-20s with 3 kids who are now realizing that 19 was really young to be married. They say they miss the opportunities they never had to date, have intimate partners besides their spouse, and not have to take care of their kids at such a young age, etc. Also, a lot of my clients got married young for religious reasons, and then one of them begins to question their faith, which is difficult for both. 3. Expecting your partner to read your mind. 4. The 4 horsemen as mentioned earlier. 5. Alcohol/drugs. 6. Waiting until your relationship is already dead on arrival before coming to therapy, and then expecting the therapist to revive it in 1 hour. That last one makes a lot of sense to me. I bet it's really hard to see these problems cropping up in the moment. And when you don't see the problems, it's hard to know to seek help for them. Also, I'm sure there's a good amount of people who have problems in their relationships who don't want to see a counselor for whatever reason, until it's much too late at least. And yeah, that can be rough. Also, on the getting married young thing, terrifies me. I'm not that young anymore, but I still don't have any interest in getting married at the moment. The never having intimate partners besides their spouse, though, I'm not hopeful on that one regardless for me. Story 15. I am a clinical mental health counselor and I do quite a bit of marital, family, and premarital counseling. This is a question with many different answers, many of which have been answered in the hours before I arrived in the thread. I had clients today. But if there is one thing I would say is the most important factor in success or failure in a relationship, it is active listening. People nowadays simply do not know how to actively listen to one another. Social media and a false sense of hyperconnectivity makes this issue much worse. Older couples with beautiful, mutually supportive marriages have naturally identified the importance of listening and have negotiated the ways their partner needs to be heard. Relationships succeed or fail on this simple premise. Be still and listen to your partner. Story 16. Not a counselor, but happily married for 15 years here. Your partner is your best friend. Even when you're annoyed, even if you're having an argument, they don't stop being the person you love and the person you want to be with. So stop trying to be right and remember you're a team, both pulling in the same direction. Also, banging is not just something that happens when you reach the bedroom. Sometimes an affectionate moment in the morning leads to banging many hours later. I think that many men especially tend to forget this. They can be distracted and non-affectionate all day and wonder why their partner can't just flip a switch in the evening. Story 17. Always validate feelings over experience, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Example, I can see why you would be frustrated because you feel overwhelmed, because you feel like no one understands, and because you see no end in sight. The key is to use 3 becauses to validate your loved one. Chances are they don't want the problem fixed, they just want to be heard. Also, it's important to identify cycles that you both get caught in. A typical cycle that almost everybody can relate to is distancer or pursuer. When conflict arises, do you pursue your partner and want to fix or make them better? Or do you distance for fear of making things worse? Identify your cycle and see the cycle as the problem, not you or your partner. You are a team confronting the cycle. Keep yourself accountable with recognizing when you get in your cycle. See that you and your partner have the same intentions to protect the other and alleviate their pain. It just presents differently. Set rules for fighting, like no using the past against the other or no low blows or inappropriate name calling. Story 18. Obligatory not a counselor, but some things I noticed from relationships that fell apart. 1. Try not to be the control freak. My aunt's first husband divorced her because she was trying to control him. 2. Have the talk about whether you want kids or not when the relationship gets serious enough. A friend of mine recently broke up with her boyfriend because he wanted kids and she didn't, and they were unable to reconcile that. Also, you don't want to be the person in a marriage who resents your spouse because you disagreed on whether to have kids, but well, stuff happens and now you're stuck with a little squealing poop machine that you can't return to where it came from. 3. Don't be the one who gets home and promptly kicks your shoes off because you want to sit back and watch football. Can also lead to divorce if your spouse feels like he or she is constantly being ignored. 4. Don't bring your frustrations from work home with you. It's okay to say that you had a bad day, but no matter how frustrated you get, don't take it out on the family.